Today, my guest, you know him as a former in-ring performer. He is a tag team champion. He is a current WWE producer, and I've known him for almost 20 years now, which is hard to believe. Mr.
Wow.
TJ Wilson.
Hell yeah. How you doing, man? Thanks
I'm
for having me.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I think in all the time that we've known each other, we've talked on and off about the developmental thing, but I don't think we've ever taken like a deep dive into your background.
Yeah, man. I love like what you kind of said to me is like developmental, what it is now versus what it was then, and how like in at least the way we see the landscape right now, it'll kind of never be what it was back then, which is when you kind of explained that your version of that to me, I thought was very very exciting and very just like I mean this will be really fun. I let me just start off by saying I love my time in developmental. I was there for almost 2 years, a little over 2 years, just under 2 years when I got called up. But then there's still a bit of time that like I'm on the main roster, but I'd still come back and do FCW a bunch. So like I was still around a whole lot.
So going way back, what drew you into professional wrestling? What was it that caught your eye and wanted you to pursue this?
So I've told the story a couple times. An older cousin of mine showed me wrestling when I was about, I must have been like 7 or 8, and I thought it was so cool. In my mind, I don't know what exactly I saw, but in my mind, and it's funny, I YouTubed this match just to see that it exists. In my mind, I can remember like Demolition and Killer Bees for whatever reason, and I don't know if they wrestled each other. I don't know if like my cousin just like if I just saw them on a show, my cousin told me about them. I don't know I don't know. I've Googled, like I said, a YouTube. There is a match. There's a couple, but I don't know if that's what I saw. But anyway, my cousin showed me wrestling, and I thought it was really, really cool. And then I went home and tried a couple of the moves on my younger sisters, and wrestling quickly got banned in my household. And at the time, I was a big Ninja Turtles fan, so Ninja Turtles wasn't getting banned, just wrestling, this new wrestling thing that I hadn't really quite, it just kind of sunk a little tooth in me. I wasn't fully bit yet, so I was okay as long as I had Turtles. And then I went to school with Teddy Hart the next year. Teddy came to my school, and it's been on since. He invited me to his house over and over, and I finally went to his house, and just when you're around, especially if you're like an outsider like that, if you're around the Hart family, and just especially at that time, man, you just get snowed into wrestling. Like it just was like I'd sleep over on a Friday night, and then Saturday we'd wake up and it'd just be I'd want to play video games or whatever, but they'd want to watch wrestling. So I just kind of sat through it at first, and then like as I'm sitting through it, I realized, oh yeah, I forgot. I only saw it like a couple times, and I really like this thing. Maybe my mom won't ban it now. And so, but honestly, so I was like it was 90 to 92. I'm watching, and then SummerSlam 92. Brett and Davey was when I saw wrestling in a totally different light, and that for whatever strange, bizarre reason, not only did it motivate me to wrestle, but if for some weird reason, something in my mind was that match told me this is what I was going to do. And when I was 17, so 5 years later, when I turned 17, I was probably 5'5", 5'6", probably 5'6", and 100 pounds. So imagine what I was at 12. I was probably 80 pounds, 70 pounds. I was a real small kid. So imagine like this 12-year-old that is like so sure he's going to be a wrestler because he saw the British Bulldog who's about 260 pounds against Bret Hart who's about 240. So the math doesn't quite make sense, yet here we are.
Now, growing up and getting in the way that you did, being around all these larger than life people, did it make you respect it more and like I would assume that it was just a learning experience 24/7 being around
It,
everybody.
it really was. It really was such a learning experience, and just not only a learning experience, but like at the highest degree. Like, later on, obviously not initially, but like there's times in it during my wrestling career where like we're not even. I'm trying to think how old we were. I think we were like 16, maybe 17, and we went down in the dungeon with Owen once, Teddy and I. Think we might have been, yeah, 15 or 16. I don't think I was. Anyway, we kind of explained to Owen that this is just one example of just like this learning tree, this endless learning tree. But kind of explained to Owen that like we knew how to do some moves, but we didn't know how to make a match or how to like. We would just do stuff, and we didn't know like is that good? We didn't know. What we would do for a long time was we would like copy a match. We'd watch a match, kind of write it down, and kind of go do our own version of it. So we went down one time, Teddy and I. It was really, especially now when you really think about it, it was a wild experience. But it was just, it was like Owen's decision. He took Teddy and I downstairs into the basement, into the dungeon, and called a match for us on the fly. Like he just called it for us and like, TJ, do this. All right. Teddy, do that. And just like he called this match for us that we did on the fly. Like that's just like great memory I have, and just like learning so much of like, wow, like, and I spent a lot of time around Brett and Davey, of course, and Jim. And so just I got all these different tidbits of knowledge, and I was trained with Ross and Bruce. That's who trained me, Ross Hart and Bruce Hart. I just, and then Tokyo Joe helped refine a lot of that. And just, man, like being around the Hart House, there were just, Stampede Wrestling was kind of defunct when I was around, and it kind of had a bit of a resurgence in like 97. So from like 90 to, I think it closes the end of 89, which is funny because then I become friends with Ted in 90 right after. So Stampede doesn't exist for almost like 7 years, but Ross and Bruce are still training people up at the house all the time. So like, so even I'd learned from like these, I'd get little bits of knowledge from these guys that were like just brand new training. Just I'm a kid, man. I've never even like been in a ring. So you just, that was the one cool, like Hard House was kind of like Grand Central Station, and there just was like, there were always people there, man. That house was never just empty. It wasn't like you knock on the door. First off, nobody ever knocked on the door. You just open the door. But there's no such thing as nobody's home at the Hard House. There's always somebody at home. Maybe during the Canadian Stampede might be the first time nobody's home. Maybe. There might still be, someone might have been there. Someone might have still been there. But dude, like, and every person in the family is knowledgeable about wrestling to a different degree. Some have, been Bret Hart and really done it, and some have kind of been a little bit more in the shadows, but they have real knowledge of it and an understanding and their understanding and their knowledge of it. And it might be a little different from the other person's, and it is different, I never met Dean Hart. So there's 12 kids. Stu had 12 kids. I never met Dean, but I met the other 11. I've known them all, and they all had different little takes in wrestling.
When did you feel like your career started taking off after you were training, and did you like go back and talk to them and get advice as you were going, like if this was a good decision or if like to better round yourself as you were progressing?
No, I mean, that was and when I look back on it, it's just, I didn't take it for granted in the moment, but I also didn't understand exactly how valuable it was. I don't think, but like just the fact that like Brett, their schedules were crazy back then, but the fact that Bret Hart could show up to a Sunday dinner, like we had a video once where we were wrestling in the ring, is in like June '96. We're wrestling in the ring outside Stu's, and Brett's car pulls up, and like we know Brett's car, so like his car pulls up as we're wrestling. And like we were filming, like we had like it was funny. We had our little promotion. It was only like 4, 5, 6 of us, but we play multiple different characters, whatever. And Brett pulls up, and he actually gets out of his car, and he just kind of like watches for a few minutes, and then I remember we go inside after, and he's, you know, he was kind of like happy to see that like this next generation was starting to get going. I lived with Davey for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, always great advice. I never, like I said, I didn't take it for granted. I just have always thought like how weird the universe is, that like
Mm-hmm.
I was born in Calgary. Like I could have been born anywhere. Why was I born in Calgary? Why did I go to this school with Ted? If I didn't go to school with Ted, if he didn't come to he went to a different school.
Mm-hmm.
And then if he didn't come to my school at that time, you and I aren't sitting here talking right now.
Mm-hmm.
I probably don't even, I probably don't ever even really get into wrestling as a fan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe I would have discovered it, but it took them forcing me to discover it. And I really just, I fell in love with it like deep. And there's a period of time where I'm staying with Harry
Mm-hmm.
and Davey, and Harry's family, and I've never been a great sleeper, but anyway, I would wake up early and everyone else is sleeping. I'd go down to the basement and they just had a library of tapes of like, yeah, everything: WWF pay-per-views, WCW pay-per-views, some Japanese. Just like some stuff would be labeled, some stuff wouldn't. I would just go down. I'd wake up in the morning and just go downstairs and like put in a tape and just watch as much wrestling as I could consume. And like, you know, and I was trying to like fall. I'd go curl up on the couch and like try to fall back asleep, and I generally usually wouldn't be falling back. What? Did that mess that up?
Can you still hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay, yeah.
Sorry, I just had blocked the phone call. I'm sorry. I would just go down and watch these tapes, man. And it's funny when I just was telling somebody about that the other day, and when I look back at it, that's what I learned. I got a lot of little techniques, and I learned a lot of stuff just watching so much wrestling and being like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this isn't the only guy who does this thing. This guy did it back here
Mm-hmm.
4 years ago. You know what I mean? And I just started to kind of connect a lot of pieces.
How long did you train before you started going out on your own in wrestling?
I will say, well, it's really strange because we kind of did all of our stuff as a little group. Um, Teddy's brother and Harry had a match. Every summer there's this town in Alberta called Rockyford, and every year there's this Rockyford rodeo, and they had a deal with Stu way back from like. Remember seeing this plaque? Remember seeing this plaque in Stu's office from, I believe, 97, and it said like 40 years of Rockyford rodeo and something. So like in the heyday of Stampede Wrestling, Stu had been doing shows at Rockyford. So even when Stampede was defunct now in the 90s, they still would do these annual Rockyford shows on a Saturday and a Sunday, 2-day shows. And in 94, Harry and Teddy's brother Matthew wrestled a match. And it was so, here's a good one. They came to Teddy and his sister came to my house to borrow my video camera to film the match. I had a video camera somehow. And they came to my house to borrow the camera, and then they said, you should come. And I said, no, I'm gonna hang out. I had a friend over. I said, no, I'll hang out with, I'm just gonna stay home. And they're like, just come, just come. And my friend was like, well, I'm gonna go home anyway. And I was like, so I just kind of was like, well, I guess I'll go. I don't know why I loved wrestling at this point, but I think I was like 14 and I was maybe wanting to be rebellious. I don't know. So I go there thinking like, well, I guess I'll sit through this thing. It's not WWF, and I was blown away. And seeing Matt and Harry have that match, changed my life. Changed my life. And Ted and I sat in the crowd watching it, and we looked at each other. 14 years old, we looked at each other, and we knew that like, all right. I remember Ted said next year we're gonna wrestle too, and then we did. So we always did everything as a group. It was kind of these little combinations of the four of us, like myself, Ted, Harry, and his brother Matt. At this point, Ted was going to school in a different province, so like so September comes around, he goes to school. Harry lives in Florida, so now it's just Matt and I. So Matt and I are just kind of like wrestling. We had an amateur wrestling practice, and practice was like at 6, and it was at Ted's father owned a gym, so they lived in the gym. They lived in the upstairs quarters of this gym, and the amateur wrestling practice was at the gym. Practice was like at 6, and our school got out at like 2:30, and we would from 3 to 6 we would be pro wrestling. We take bumps on a crash pad, and that's where we came up with like these characters, and we were putting this is the start of us putting together this promotion. It wasn't until way later that I kind of got out on my own. Like even Mat Rats is another thing that happens, but even after that, honestly, probably New Japan. Like in 2002, when I started training with Tokyo Joe, is when I started kind of not doing my own thing, but I started kind of going off myself into this direction a little bit more. We're all still part of this. Matthew had passed away in '96 of flesh-eating disease, but the three of us had all stayed close, Harry, Ted, and I, especially in terms of wrestling. And like, at one point Ted was like 16 with like a fake ID or something, wrestling on these bar shows. So he kind of ventured off first. He was doing his own thing, and like I remember him coming. At one point, I lived with Ted, and I remember when I'm 17, I do my 12th grade. I live with Ted. I remember him coming into the room in the middle of the night, like 3 a.m., and he just had like not a ton of cash, but it felt like a ton of cash at the time, like probably like $300 or $400, and it was like. He's like, yeah, these Polaroids I'm selling, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, what is going on? And he's like 60, he was 17. He was 17 at the time. So but I started kind of venturing on my own, probably like, not on my own, but a little bit more, like 22.
How was your time in New Japan?
I loved it. I loved wrestling in New Japan. They took a chance on a kid that I hadn't experienced much at that point. I say that. I mean, you asked the question earlier, and the first thing that popped in my head was we did. It was in honor of Matthew's passing away, but we did a live event match at the Saddle Dome in 1996, October 5th, 1996. We did a tag team match on like a WWF show. Like the main event of that show is Shawn Michaels and Vader. And Brett came to that show. I don't know if he'd re-signed yet. He's about to come back to Raw a few weeks later, and then the match with Steve Austin at Survivor Series is a month after that. Mm-hmm. But he's at that show, and I think that's where we kind of won Brett over, like really won him over. I think when he saw us earlier that summer is when he pulled up and saw us wrestling, and he already. Can you hear me?
You're back now, so you cut out for a second.
I'm so sorry that I think they're testing something on this jet. So we had back-to-back hurricanes in this generator that we didn't buy. It was already here when we bought this house, but it didn't work. It worked, but something wasn't giving the power through. Mm-hmm. So I think we're working on that right now. Is why it keeps going off and on.
Okay.
Sorry.
You're fine.
So Brett, when he saw us at that Calgary show, that's when he kind of extended the invite to come and train at his house. And at Brett's house, I tell this story. This is where I really won Brett over. I feel like we were in the ring with him one day, Ted and I, and he was talking about King of the Ring '93. And again, this goes back to what I was saying before, where I would just watch these tapes, like, oh, King of the Ring, put it in, watch it. Watch the whole show, start to finish. Okay. I really like this one. Watch this one back. Okay. Watch this one back. Okay. Next tape, whatever. Brett was talking about King of the Ring '93, and he doesn't win any of the tournament matches with the sharpshooter. So he said he had to come up with a story as to why. And he's like, do you remember what it was? And not to throw Ted under the bus, but Ted said, yeah, your knee. They worked your knee. And Brett said no. And then he kind of looked at me. In my mind, I was like, And then I remembered a lot of things. But I remembered like Brett going for the sharpshooter and like Mr. Perfect grabbing his fingers. And I said, your fingers. And Brett said, he almost was like, he's like, yeah. He said, how did you remember that? And I think Brett and I have had a really good relationship ever since that. But my time in New Japan, man, like I said, they took a chance on a kid that I didn't have any kind of worldly experience or anything at this point. And it was, of course, on the recommendation of my Japanese trainer. He had a good relationship with them and a working relationship with them, and that's what got that through. But I recently got funny enough, a DVD of some of my matches from there that I hadn't seen in a while. And like when I watched them back, I'm like, man, I thought I was all right, but I'm not actually that good at that time. Or whatever. But some stuff holds up. Some stuff I wish I could do better, but I think that's life. I loved my time in Japan, man. Honestly, if things had worked out, I would have had no problem, going over there maybe however many times a year as they wanted me. I would have had no problem of like that being my wrestling career, being in Japan. Like when I went there at 22, the fact that I was 22, man, I wanted to be so loyal to, and not that I have a bad relationship or something bad happened. Nothing bad happened. It just different management, and then they just kind of went in a different direction, and things changed, but there was no battle or insulting or I did 2 Super Juniors tournaments, and that, I mean, from 22 to 25, I only did 5 tours. I did 3 quick. I did 3 in 6 months, and I was really excited. And then there was a year between the next one, and then a year between that last one. And that last one I knew was the last one. It was, like I said, it was no hard feelings. I knew it was the last one, but I never, I always appreciated that they gave me that chance, and that I could sit here and say I wrestled for New Japan and that I've done 2 Super Juniors tournaments.
Absolutely. When did you shift focus? I would assume WWE was always the goal, but when did you actively start pursuing that and trying to get noticed by them?
I mean, yes, WWE was always the goal. Always. Like I said, I would have been okay with Japan being my entire wrestling career if that's how things had worked out. And I didn't think that before. Like, I was really always wanted to go to WWE since I was a kid. And then when just the Ross Hart set up my training with Tokyo Joe, and then that's what led to New Japan. And when I went to Japan that first time, it blew me away. I thought everyone was so professional. I was just so blown away that I was like, wow, I'm okay if this becomes my reality now, and that WWE dream is, maybe I don't reach it or whatever. But so I guess that after even during my tours, I was still always watching WWE when I was home and stuff. It was always the goal. Definitely the focus got shifted a lot more after that last tour, for sure. And I just come home so I did England in 2005. I went to England in January, and I wrestled for Brian Dixon from January till the end of May. I came home for about 3 weeks, and then I went to Japan for a month. So the first 6 months of 2005, I'm not really home a whole lot. And then I came home, and then the WWE was definitely the focus, and that happened to coincide with Brett going into the Hall of Fame. And Brett brought myself, Natty, Harry, and Ted as extra guests of his to the Hall of Fame. And that was kind of where conversations started happening a little bit. More so for Harry and a little bit more so for Ted, more so than for myself and Natty. But Harry got signed that weekend. And then Ted had a real good talk with them. But I didn't really have a formal talk. I just had a little conversation with Carl DeMarco that kind of led to an eventual tryout 6 months later.
And how did your tryout go?
it went very well. So I'll never forget Carl DeMarco. This is where, and rest in peace to Brian Dixon. He was always so good to me. He really was good to me. I was like one of the only, or maybe the only person allowed to eat in his car. The rule was if I ever made a mess, that ended, and I made a point never to leave a mess in Brian's car. But Carl DeMarco called me and said, TJ, would you like to work here? And I was like, well, yes. I was talking about WWE, and I was like, yes, of course. And at this time, Carl DeMarco was like president of WWE Canada. I believe he still was that at this time. I might be wrong. And he said, okay. He said, I'll be honest. You're a little bit. Usually Johnny will kind of take my recommendations and just kind of go with it. He's like, but you're a little bit of a hard sell due to your size and stuff. I said, I understand that. That's been my story this whole time. That's not some new story. That's no problem for me in terms of, okay, that's not some new thing. And I'm like, ooh, how do I attack this? Like, okay. So he said, can you be busy? Can you be busy this summer? Because if you're busy, it'll help. So I called Brian Dixon and I said, hey, Brian, I know it's short notice, but if you have any, and I thought Brian was going to tell me no, because it was like early July, and like he kind of sets up his summers are pretty packed, and he kind of sets them up like probably in April or if not earlier. So I called him and he said, yeah, he said, I can use you right now. The sooner you can get here, I can use you as soon as you get here. And I was always very grateful for that. Brian literally, so I went there. So then when I got a call to call Carl from England. So I called him and he told me, okay, your tryout set October 1st. He said, you're not really going to get much bigger. You're not going to get, you can get a little bit leaner or whatever. He's like, show up, be as tanned as possible. He said, and here's what you have to do more than anything. You have to out wrestle every single person there. Not one single person can out wrestle you that week. They cannot. I said, I understand. And I thought the tryout went awesome. Of course, promos were going to be the hard part. But to his credit, Bill DeMott was really, really good to me that week. Really good. And let me think. Monday week. So I was so nervous going in for my tryout, man. So nervous. And I walk in this building. It's like in this like strip mall. I walk in. First guy I see is Dave Taylor in the ring, and he goes, TJ Wilson, who I'd been with Dave in England the year prior. And I teamed with him, and I believe I'd wrestled him, and he ran like kind of on the fly these two seminars, these two little workouts before shows, but basically what would be a seminar now. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh. So when I walked in and saw Dave, and he greeted me like that and didn't pretend like, oh, like we'd never met, and now I gotta, when he treated me so great, I still had crazy nerves, but they kind of calmed down. And then when we were doing the drills, I was like, yo, I have the cheat sheet. I did this with Dave in England last year. So like the first guy I did a drill with there was MVP, funny enough. So MVP and then Dave Taylor. So that week, Monday was just a regular practice. Tuesday, same thing, regular practice. I remember Dave telling me, because we do a little jog, he said, hey, how are your promos? I said, I need work. And he said, okay. He said, get with Bill, get him, see if he'll help you. And I remember he said, go see if you have to do the afternoon class too. And Bill said, no, don't do the afternoon class. You're good. So they treated me great off the start. Wednesday was, so I came in Tuesday night after the afternoon practice, and Bill worked on promos with me. I came in, Wednesday was a drill day because Thursday was the shows. So Wednesday was a drill day where the two classes would be combined and be like I could be completely a little off on this. But I think it was like a 3-hour just like drills, all of us. And then I came in and worked with Bill on promos again. And then Thursday was the show. And I wrestled Kofi in a dark match. And I did a promo for The Office that Thursday afternoon that wasn't a perfect promo, but I got through. I remember Bill was very proud of me, and I was very proud of myself. But it wasn't like I became, CM Punk or something, man. It was good enough. Let's say it was probably if I were to watch it back now, it might not even be good enough, but it felt like it was good enough. And the interesting thing that I always think about, the match I had with Kofi was October 5th, 2006. And that match we had in Calgary was October 5th, 1996, which was exactly, not to the day, but to the date 10 years later, which I always thought was like some kind of cool, there's a lot of things like that in my life, some kind of cool, weird wrestling fate for me, luckily.
So how long after that did you get your developmental offer?
So I remember seeing Dave Taylor, because when we flew out on that Friday, I remember Dave told me on Thursday before the match with Kofi, I think, he pulled me aside and said, "Hey, just so you know, the email Bill wrote about you for your assessment," he said, "I've never seen Bill write such a nice email for anybody." And I just remember being like, wow, like in my mind, obviously I didn't have the deal yet, but in my mind I was like, I did it. I did this step. And then it started to wear on me a little. I didn't get a call for a month. And I just kept being like, man, maybe it would be a tough pill to swallow. I get it. It's tough for anybody, chasing your dreams. It's hard to achieve your dreams. But for that month, I was like, I thought the email was really good, and I didn't hear anything. And I started to think like, man, I remember I'm friends with Johnny Devine. He trained in the, and so I remember at the time he's in TNA, and I remember talking to him and being like, man, I wonder if TNA's interested, and I can at least maybe, if I don't get this offer right now, maybe I can maybe I can go to TNA, and maybe I end up, I'm always going to be loyal to whoever is giving me a chance. I'm never really looking at it like a stepping stone. I didn't look at New Japan as a stepping stone. Like I said earlier, WWE was the goal, but then once I started going to Japan, that became its own thing. It wasn't a stepping stone to me. Just like Mat Rats, which we didn't really go over, but Mat Rats was its own thing. That I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to use this to get to. I was hoping Mat Rats was going to be its own thing and be awesome. So I remember messaging Johnny Devine about maybe going to TNA, and either that would create buzz, or maybe I end up, being a lifer there. And I literally got a call the next morning. From Mike Bucci.
Now, did they talk to you about where they were going to send you, or did they just tell you that you were going to go to Deep South?
Yeah, he told me I was going to Deep South, which is where I did my tryout Deep South. I've never been to OVW, funny enough. Not for any choice of my own. I just have never been there.
So how was Deep South for you?
Okay, so I got signed. So my tryout's October. I get signed, or like I agreed to my deal in November. I remember asking Harry, I didn't want to, my whole thing is like, especially then, I just was real quiet and I didn't want to bother anybody. So I just was like, I just kind of stay in the shadows a little bit sometimes, and maybe to my detriment. But I just remember asking Harry, like, hey, how long did it take for you to get your deal? And Harry said, I don't know, because he signed it at WrestleMania that weekend. And then he went to England. He wrestled in like England and Germany and stuff. And when he came home, his contract was already there. So he didn't know. So it had been a couple of weeks and I didn't get a contract yet in the mail. And then one day I got a call from Mike Bucci, and he said, hey, did you get a contract? I said, nope. And he said, man, I forgot to. He said, when I signed you that day, I signed like 5 other guys. He said, for whatever reason, your email didn't go through. And I remember thinking like, oh. And he said it'll be there overnight. I'm sorry. So anyway, so like I did my tryout. I got signed. I got the phone call a month later, and I got the contract almost a month later. Like, and I still have to get a work visa. Well, I get my work visa. The irony of getting my work visa was I actually, uh, and I haven't really been in too many car accidents, but this is my first real one. I slid on some ice and crashed into a car, and this is the winter in Calgary. Happened to be a witness there. Happened to work at this uh, auto shop. They were able to get me in early. Otherwise, this was Valentine's Day or something. This is February. Nobody could even see me for an assessment until the end of March. Because when you're in Calgary, if you're in these winter states, you understand that these states that get snow and stuff, when there's snow and there's accidents, these auto bodies get backed up. So in Calgary, man, no place that my insurance would use would get me in until end of March for an assessment. I had the car accident. The very next morning, I get a phone call from Mike Gucci, and he used my legal name, Theodore James Matthew Wilson. Do you know what I'm holding in my hand? I said, yeah. By the way, you just said my name. You have my work visa. He said, yes, I do. I said, yeah, here's the problem. I had a car accident yesterday. So now I have to wait like another few weeks. So anyway, long story short, I got to Deep South a little bit before like WrestleMania 23. So I'm there in like March. I'm only there for like 4 weeks before Deep South shuts down. When I got there, Dr. Tom's the coach now. Bill DeMott had been replaced. Dr. Tom and Brad Armstrong are the coaches, and Dr. Death is an assistant coach too. Mm-hmm. And I'd actually, funny enough, team with Dr. Tom at a show in Washington before. So like, not that I knew him, but I at least had a little rapport with him prior to this. So I at least, I was real nervous. Again, I was really nervous for my trial. I'm really nervous to go to Deep South and to go to Developmental, because like this is every step in wrestling is like, but especially when you're within the system, it feels like sink or swim. On my tryout, it's sink or swim. If I sink, I'm not getting signed. Okay, I got signed. That's great. But then it's like, okay, you do this tryout and then you get signed, and you're kind of like, when you get signed, you're kind of at the top. But then once you show up to Developmental, I'm at the very bottom again. Just kind of like work my way up through Developmental. You get called up, you're on the main roster at the very bottom. It's this perpetual ladder that's going on, like that Jacob's ladder. It's going on forever, man. And Deep South was interesting. Deep South was really interesting. It just was a funny mix of philosophies. You could kind of see like this new style, like, 2007. I'm trying to do almost a version of like New Japan's juniors, a little bit more action. I'm not like, at that time I'm like, hovering around 200 pounds. I'm in that 190, 200. I'm in that ballpark. I'm not Bobby Lashley. I'm not Batista. So like, if I wrestle like them, I think I've lost the plot. So I just remember I'll never forget. Okay, so I wrestled I'm trying to think the 4 TVs I did. I wrestled Kofi, the first one, in Deep South. I wrestled, that one was on Deep South TV. I wrestled Bradley J in a dark match. Harry and I wrestled Bad Seed and Bolin on a TV match because they were taking a look at us as a team. And the last dark match I did he wasn't signed, but he was there training, was Brian Cage. And actually Woods a little while ago has told me he was in the crowd for that match, and he said that match made him, he must already be wrestling at that time, but I think he said like that one was like where he was like, okay, I'm going to do this. Something like that. But Brian Cage and I went out there and we had very non-Deep South match. I mean, a very, very non-Deep South match. We had a very action-packed, nothing wild, nothing dropping each other on their heads or anything, but just very action-packed, like 6-minute Deep South match that when we watched back at practice the next day, I didn't get reamed out for it, but I kind of got put on the spot a little bit, where Jody Hamilton he was like, what we do is we'd have the shows Thursday. And then, again, I was only there a month to see this, but we'd have the show Thursday, and then Friday we'd watch it back at practice. And so we'd watch a match. He'd press pause. He'd turn to the people that were in the match, get their thoughts on it, and then give his thoughts on it. Brian Cage, I feel like he wasn't there that next day. But I remember paused the match, and Jody looks at me and he's like, "What'd you think?" And I said, "Oh, some things that could definitely be better, but I thought it was really cool." So Brian Cage and I do this match. Then the next day, Jody Hamilton, he presses pause, and he's like, "What'd you think?" And I said, "I thought some cool action." I was like, "We could definitely slow down." I said, if I'm being perfectly honest, I said things that I didn't really believe, but I knew were the right answer. Mm-hmm. And so I said, we can definitely slow down a little bit, da-da-da-da-da. And then I remember, and I'm brand new. I'm brand new. And I remember Jody said, that match was like a machine gun. He said, how many bullets does a machine gun shoot? And I looked around, and everybody's just kind of looking at me. And I was like, and in my mind, man, I've told this story to some of the guys. I remember thinking, is it called an AK-47 because it shoots 47? I was like, I said, so my answer was, I said, I'm from Canada. We don't really play with guns like that. And everybody burst out laughing. And I was thinking in my mind, guys, don't egg me on because I know my personality. This could get a lot worse. Please don't egg me on. This is not, everybody's laughing, but I didn't know. I wasn't even trying to be funny. I literally I didn't know the answer. I didn't know if there was a real answer. And I just was trying to, I didn't want to insult him. So I could have easily just said, I don't know, but I guess I was trying to be funny. And then he said, well, if I pull out a handgun and I go bang, 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 how many bullets is that? And I said, well, that's 3. And then he's like, so which one would you rather use? And I was thinking in my head, someone's breaking into my house. I'd rather use the one that, have you ever seen I Still Know What You Did Last Summer? They thought they killed the guy and he comes back because they shot him with a handgun. And I just remember thinking man, it's going to be, in my mind in that moment, honestly, I was like, it's going to be oil and water, but I'm definitely going to get through this. But man, I won't name names, but I remember watching, one of my weeks there, the first weeks, we watched the show back. It was, I got there on a Monday. Maybe I didn't, anyway, we were watching a match back and it was really basic and yeah, that's fine. But it was really, I remember same thing, Jody paused and he's like, what'd you guys think? And they said the same thing, slow down. He's like, yeah, exactly. A little bit slower. And I was like, man, any slower, these guys might be moving backwards. I was like, it's going to be a tough, I can adjust for sure, but it's just not going to, it's going to be a bit of a transition here. And then, the next week, Deep South got shut down. And then we were on pause for a month, man, just living in McDonough, Georgia. Some guys went home. Some people lived I remember Robert Anthony drove back home. A few guys went home. But I lived too far away. I lived in a whole different country. And so we just hung out in McDonough for a month. And then we had Backlash in Atlanta. We all went to that. And then they said, okay. Backlash was only a few weeks after we got shut down, maybe 2. And then they said, all right, in a couple weeks, everybody had to Tampa, or not everybody, but you guys had to Tampa. Certain people had already been to OVW, the majors. Mm-hmm. And I think Angelina Love goes there very briefly. A few people, does Brad J go there?
He went there for some time. I think.
Yeah, he goes to OVW. He goes to OVW at that time. He doesn't come to FCW right away. He comes to FCW after.
So how was that transition from Deep South shutting down to FCW opening? I know that it was probably a little bit of a rough start for everybody.
It was interesting. It was cool. I remember moving down here at first. I was like, damn, this is extra. We moved down to Florida in May. I remember in June, I remember being like, man, this place is hot. I'm so used to it now that it's all good. It was I liked it. I liked it. It was almost like, I saw it as like a brand new, fresh, like I'd only been in Deep South for a month, but now it was like this new, fresh start where like I came into Deep South, and Deep South's, if you want to call it Deep South's culture, was already implemented.
Mm-hmm.
This was a chance, not just for me, for all of us and for me to be a part of it. I wasn't a part of the other one. This was a chance for me to be a part of implementing whatever FCW's culture was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I saw it. And I'm sorry. And at first, man, we had 2 rings set up, and we were at this place called Hitmasters, which was batting cages. And it was like kids were taking these batting lessons. I remember looking over, and these kids, they were just like hanging on the nets. We didn't have like curtains or anything. We just had like mesh net. You could see exactly what we were doing. So like these kids they weren't really doing their baseball practice. They were watching our wrestling practice. And then we were up at Hitmasters for about a month, and then we moved down to Dale Mabry to the FCW arena, which wasn't quite an arena, especially at first. It was a warehouse, almost like a Costco storage. Like it just was like it was so many canned goods. Like we were in this warehouse, man, with canned goods. I remember at one point Steve's like, yeah, take some pineapple. Like we had like I remember having like 8 cans of sliced pineapples at my house. It was crazy. And we would sit on we had these 2 we had 2 rings at the time at FCW when we went to the warehouse as well. It was hot. There was no AC in there. We had these 2 big industrial fans, and we would sit on like planks of wood. Now, when Deep South closed down, Dr. Tom wanted we were all getting ready to do the practice was going to be these hour-long matches. Everyone was going to do a 60-minute match just to have one under your belt. And I remember when FCW started, Dr. Tom said, hey guys, we're still going to do these hour-long matches. They're still coming. He wasn't kidding. We did them in that warehouse with no AC, and it was insane.
That's like the perfect way to train and come up and develop. I feel like is that downright dirty, the hot atmosphere, just everything. I think in my opinion, it makes you appreciate it.
For sure, and that's kind of what the dungeon is like too. Like I don't have AC at my ring. I have it's funny. I have 2 industrial fans, and I have a nice WWE ring with like even a set of steps, and I have the mats on the outside. But outside of that, nothing else. And some of the talent, but outside of that, nothing else in there screams like WWE or glamour, but by any stretch of the imagination. And to that point, it reminded me of the dungeon. The dungeon, the weather was a huge element, man. If it was cold outside, it was cold in the dungeon. And when it was warm outside, we'd set the ring up and do practice out there. And sometimes, like in Stampede Wrestling, we had this at one point we had this dark blue canvas. Well, that canvas during the summer, it's hot, man. You take a bump and you hear like on your back, and you're getting right back up. So, yeah, man. So FCW reminded me of a more extreme version of that, especially that summer. I remember Dean Lenko told me, he said he came down to FCW that first summer, and he said he'd been in Tampa at that time for like 32 years. And he said, this is the hottest summer yet. And I was like, well, if this is the hottest one, we're wrestling through this. When I get on the other side of this, I'll be okay. It was draining, man. It was draining. We'd all go to this little, this place called Crazy Buffet and eat this sushi and hibachi and stuff after practice. And then I would just come home to our apartment and I would just go to have a nap, and I'd wake up and it'd be so dark. It gets dark earlier here than in Calgary. I was so used my whole life. I lived in Calgary, and the sun sometimes, especially in the summer, the sun's out till like 10 p.m. I'd wake up. I'd wake up from this nap and it's pitch black and it's like 6 p.m. I'm like, what? And then I was having these like nothing more. It just, my body took a while to get used to just the drain of it. I was having these nothing having workouts.
Mm-hmm.
But we were all a part of shaping the FCW culture at the time, I feel like.
So how was that time period? You guys basically built this arena together. You put the rings together, this cast of people. Now, was OVW still a thing, or did they implement everybody at this time?
At this point, OVW still is another developmental property.
So, building all of this up, did you make it you guys grow closer together as talent and working together and building what FCW would be?
For sure. And, it's like anything. We'd have little squabbles, and then we'd sort them out ourselves. I don't remember anything getting too crazy. But yeah, like that first group, I think it was almost, I don't know if it was a power struggle, maybe a little touch with like some of the guys who've been in Deep South a while. Mm-hmm. A couple guys, not all, like for example, like a Ryan O'Reilly, Connor from the Ascension. He was like Deep South. I believe he was Deep South champion, or he was gonna be Deep South, or he was like about to challenge Brad J or something when Deep South closed. He was in that picture. And then when we came to FCW, he wasn't trying to be like, hey, I'm the FCW, I'm the Deep South guy, and we're leading. He was cool with like this new version that, like, even if we were doing it subconsciously, but like guys like Kofi and myself and Robert Anthony were trying to bring in a little bit. And I knew that, like, for example, I knew like Matt Seidel, I knew Bourne was in OVW doing some cool stuff. So I knew like if we had enough people trying to not only do that style, but if we had enough people trying to implement just little elements of it, eventually the seeds would grow a little bit. And, but everybody had a pretty good attitude in Deep South, and in FCW, and it just kind of grew from there.
How was the differences between working for Jody versus working and training with Steve Keirn and growing and developing that way?
Extremely different. And it's not to say one's better than the other. It's just one might fit a style better than another. For example, like Steve Keirn, he was so funny. I remember I did a practice match and I did like a springboard dropkick, which like if I'd done that in a Deep South practice, it would probably be too much or something. But I remember Keirn he liked it, but he was like, I know you can do more. And I was like, damn. I'm thinking in my head, damn, in practice? Okay. And but Keirn, he had a different Steve Keirn. What a combination! Like Steve Keirn and Dr. Tom were the first two. Then Kimmon's coming around. Then Kimmon ends up being a coach. Then Norman Smiley, and of course Dusty. I'm trying not to make sure I don't forget somebody that was a coach at that time.
What a team that is!
Unbelievable. And Steve, like Dr. Tom, might be the best coach in wrestling, just in terms of like maybe not the most intricate, crazy stuff, but just fundamentals and making sure like you are prepared for a match. And Steve Keirn, they complemented each other great. Like there's so many of these like Steve Keirn quotes that I use all the time, and like he said a few like very valuable, not only wrestling lessons but life lessons. I remember him saying like he just would say not funny stuff. It is funny, but it was serious. But he was like, hey, I mean, just like he would drop this stuff at the end of a practice, and you just leave the arena being like, damn, okay. Remember, he's like, strip. He's like, here's a task for you. Go stand in front of a full length mirror, strip yourself down to your underwear, and ask yourself if you'd pay money to see that. If you wouldn't, figure out how you're going to change that. And I remember thinking like, he's not wrong. He's not wrong. And he had a bunch of good ones. Like I remember him saying, don't ever compare yourself to anybody else. You'll always lose. You're always going to find people that you can compare yourself to and think that you're doing better than. You're going to find a lot of people You compare yourself to that you feel you're doing worse than. And he said, and don't compare he said, especially in this business, he's like, life isn't fair. This business isn't fair. You're going to see somebody get away with something that you can't get away with. Don't dwell on it. Everyone has rules, and some people have a little bit of space to work within those rules, and some don't. And that goes for life. When I've been the guy that doesn't have the space to extend the rules at all, I don't. You have to be able to read the room a little bit. And Steve Keirn, man, he was great. But I can't say enough about my time in FCW. I loved it. I don't think I ever really for whether it's ignorance or whatever, there's like maybe one time I was like, oh, I wonder if I'm on the chopping block at all. But like that was never really like my predominant thought. Like I saw people in developmental who like from day one they're worried about getting fired, and of course it's going to happen, especially if you just sit and dwell on it all the time, man. You're just putting that energy out there for it to happen. It's inevitable. It has to happen if that's all you talk about and think about. And I understand where it comes from. I understand the stress and we all feel it, but for some reason, I don't know, just maybe a glitch in my brain didn't allow me to go down that road.
It would be hard to enjoy your time if that was your mindset all the time, and then I would just feel like you'd become not such a great person because you're so worried and wrapped up in yourself and don't want to get fired. Then you forget why you're there.
Yes, or even like some people obviously it wouldn't affect their personality, but all of a sudden like their work just was like kind of getting worse. Because here's the thing, and I do say this all the time. I don't know. I assume it's the same. I know developmental has changed, but I'm sure the process is still somewhat similar. It has to be. It's the wrestling business, but in developmental, man, you will get there will be not by them, but you will mess with your own mind. All of us, myself included. Whether it's like, maybe they want me to be bigger, and so I'm trying to get bigger, but I'm like, I don't look great. And I remember Dolph coming to FCW, and he was shredded, and I was like, oh, maybe I got to stop trying to be bigger, and I got to just get lean. That might be better for me. But we all get kind of like messed with your mind a little bit just because you do practice, and then you just go home, and you're just thinking about the next day's practice, and you're like, is anyone even watching what we're doing? We're like this land of misfit toys, what we kind of feel like. So you get kind of mind fucked a little bit. It happens. And then, but it's those that kick out of it that I think succeed. And unfortunately, some people don't, and I watched it. Some people didn't kick out of it. And I feel terrible if they didn't, because who knows what they might have had to offer to themselves and to the business. But it's not done on purpose by anyone in charge or coach. It's not that. It's just the pressure of going home, like practicing Monday morning and coming home and watching Raw in front of 15,000 people that night. And you go, how do these two things connect? I just wrestled in front of an empty warehouse today. How do I get to this thing? It doesn't make it just becomes a mind game that you put on yourself. I feel like for me personally, I put it on myself. It was nobody else doing that, but I was able to kind of kick out of it. But it kind of happens to everyone where you're almost like, man, I almost forgot how to wrestle a little bit, or I forgot like I remember at one point I think Breeze was having a bit of a hard time in developmental. And he told me, he said, the old matches I used to love, he said, I can't even watch them anymore. I don't get the same enjoyment anymore as a guy. I said, dude, I've been there. I've been there. I said, you're mostly putting it on yourself. I promise you, just take a step back. I said, don't let anybody take away your enjoyment of the matches that you love. Don't let anybody take that away, whether they feel you're doing a good job or not a good job. And that has nothing to do with your own joy. You cannot like, and if, he kicked out. It happens to all of us. That's my opinion. No, I have certain friends I've talked to that agree. I haven't talked with every single person that's ever been in developmental, but I think especially at that time, I think it's like inevitable.
There's a lot of like different variables too. There could be someone that comes in and is there for 3 months and they get called up, and that you've been there 2 years, and it's like it really is a mind fuck going in every aspect. It can be.
Absolutely, and like depending on like okay, say like you're very much for like a Mike Bucci guy. Then when he's not in that position anymore, now you're like, oh no, I gotta win this guy over. This other guy hates me, or like if you're a build them up guy, and then now when Dr. Tom took over, now that's where Dr. Tom's a little different. I think he's very fair and didn't paint anybody with any brush. I think he let everybody show him exactly who they were. But yeah, man, it's a wild ride, and especially because, like you said, I saw people get called up in 3 months. I saw people get let go in 3 months. I remember at a time, Colin Delaney when he was doing the stuff on ECW. Not a lot, not in. I don't know about OVW, but I know FCW. Maybe OVW was. Maybe we'd already combined into FCW at this point. I don't remember for sure. Maybe. But Colin Delaney, I was happy for. I wasn't like, oh, he's taking my spot. Like, I didn't think that. I thought, hey, man, good for this guy. He found a way. He was booked as an extra, and he found a way to land a job and not come to developmental. And now we see, like, maybe if he'd gone to developmental, it would have been good for him, or maybe not. I don't know. But I know Colin Delaney's name. I know who he is. He's a nice guy. Anytime I've ever seen him, super nice guy. And I think a few people in developmental were kind of like, not so much jealous of him, just jealous of the way it happened. Just like, oh man, like, why not call up somebody that's already in your system? But it's like, guys, like, this is entertainment. This is show business. It's what happens sometimes. It's not. I wouldn't go home and stress about it.
Now, did they have any plans for you when you got established in FCW, like who they wanted you to be, or was that like a joint effort here on who they wanted TJ to be?
No, honestly, they just kind of let me be me, and I just started, and in that I also started to find myself a lot. I would take obviously a lot of the information that they would say, and I would like see how it applied to me, and I would work on that. But Dr. Tom and Steve Keirn were like both always, man, and Kimmin and Norman. They were so good to me. I remember Dr. Tom came up to me once. I was wrestling like all new guys for a little while. Like I wrestled not on a show actually, but a practice. I wrestled like Dave Otunga's first match. I wrestled Bo Dallas's first match, I believe. I wrestled. Remember having like a 20-minute match or something with Tarver when he first got signed. I remember Dr. Tom pulled me aside at one point during, like after that, and he said, "Hey, I just want to talk to you about the way that we're booking you." And he's like, I don't want you to look at it a certain way. He's like, just know that, like, this is what Dr. Tom told me. He said, you have a knack of making chicken salad. I said, okay. I said, Tom, I'm not offended by that at all. And he said, no. He said, I just don't want you to think like, oh, because like, let me think. Harry's the first FCW champion, then Alpha Junior, then me. So like, I'd already been before we had TV, but I'd already been in FCW. So I felt like they treated me so well. I was not like, oh, Tom, what's going on with? I was okay with it, and he said, just so you know, like, he said, if we are not sure if a guy has anything, he might find himself in there with you, and then that'll kind of be our answer. So I was like, oh damn, I may be some people's last chance at keeping a job for. So I took that very seriously. I never dogged anybody. I never was like, oh, I'm gonna phone this one in and I'm gonna sell this guy up, because for all I know, it's a test, and they're really just looking at me to see if I'm the guy that's gonna get sent on my way. So, and also this is the type of person I am, and I had so much, and I still have so much respect, like I said, for all those coaches, man. Like Norman came in and changed. It was at a time where the company really wanted like a lot of holds, and Norman came in and he changed. He always laughs when I tell him this, but he changed FCW in like 2 days. Norman came in and just knew so many holds. He gave Sheamus like 4 holds. Drew, he changed those guys so much right away, instantly. And he actually texted me the other day, Norman. He's I'm so glad he's still there. He's the man. I love that guy.
So what made him have you and Harry start teaming again?
I know. So Harry was, I guess they just wanted him to keep developing, I guess. And so they sent him down to FCW. And we were both kind of doing our own thing a little bit. And then Natty actually pitched to Vince about us being a team. And Vince was very funny. He told her, he's like, well, I don't believe this is going to work, but since you came to me, we'll try it out. So then that became like the directive down to FCW was like, okay, let's see these guys as a team. So then we started teaming up. Let me think. Probably like October. Then we won the titles in like probably November or something, and then we dropped them to Tyler Rex and Johnny Curtis in December. And I remember Dusty, we had the last practice before Christmas. He was like, "There's a reason these guys are going to the main roster," and like, so I mean, it worked. Whatever that tag, and then it's so funny because then we didn't. Then I got called up. Like Harry was already on the main roster prior, and it's really funny. A long time ago, maybe in 2006. Talking with Brett, I remember Natty and I went to eat with Brett, and he was talking about, I think we were signed at this time and just waiting, or have our tryouts coming. And I remember him saying, it was very funny. He said, I would debut you 3 separately and then bring you together. And in a way, that is what happened. Mm-hmm. Harry got called up in the fall of 2007. Natty got called up after WrestleMania in 2008, and then I got called up before WrestleMania in 2009. And I got called up with Natty, run ECW, and then technically Harry got drafted to ECW, and then he joined us in May 2009. And it kind of happened the way Brett said. So it's funny, we came together in May 2009, and we started teaming in FCW, I believe, in like October 2008. Mm-hmm. So whatever, 6-7 months later, we're on the main roster.
Is there any particular moments that stand out more than others during FCW?
Oh yeah, my ladder match with Alpha Jr. was a lot of fun, and it was my first ladder match ever. We had a lot of fun. That was a hell of a moment. We'd joke around and call it pay-per-views. Every week we'd run this bar show called Bourbon Street in Newport Richie. And it was in like might have been I think it was an 18-foot ring, and WWE's are 20. And they had cables and WWE's ropes. So it just was a funny thing that we'd do these shows in this ring that's not the ring. It was a good experience for some people who didn't have that experience. I already kind of experienced that, but it is a good thing to kind of learn, just like, oh, things can change and we got to adapt. But then every month we'd have the shows we'd have a show once a month at the Jewish Community Center. So we joke that like the 4 shows at Bourbon Street were the TVs, and then Jewish Community Center was the pay-per-view. And this is before, I said we didn't get TV until the summer of '08. And we started in May '07. So we have 12, 13 months of not TV, but doing shows. And so that ladder match with Offa Jr. stands out. And he's the one who made that happen. He's the one who went to Tom, said he wanted to do this ladder match, and then put me over. That match stands out. When we won the tag titles from Heath and Joe Henning, really stands out. It was a fun match. My match with Loki. FCW, that one was on TV. Harry and I had a real fun singles match on FCW TV as well. I used to have it on my DVR many generations ago. I'm trying to think in terms of matches. I remember I don't know if I'm trying to think if we ever had like an actual match, or I remember we did some tag team stuff against each other a little bit, like myself and Trent Beretta. But we really developed a good friendship in FCW. I'm just trying to remember if we had many matches. Maybe not. Maybe more so. We did. I know for sure a tag, but maybe that's it. Trying to think. I know once we end this, I'm gonna have a really good one. Honestly, one of my favorites was it wasn't on a show or anything, but it was at like 10 a.m. on like a Friday morning. I had his tryout match, me and Rick Victor, and it was not the same, but a similar version to the Brian Cage match 2 years prior, where like we kind of went all. I've been wrestling Victor since 2001, so this was 2009. And during our Joe training, like he trained with me with Joe. He worked his ass off, but I just remember thinking like this is going to be in some senses the easiest match of our lives, and in some sense because it was like 5 or 6 minutes, and I just remember everybody lining up to shake his hand after the match, including Kidman, which is like the ultimate, like, you did a great job. Billy Kidman is getting up to shake your hand, and he doesn't know who you are, because Kidman is much like myself. He can definitely see the humor in a match that's maybe not so great.
So, during your time on the main roster, was there anything that stood out more than others for you?
On the main roster? Yeah, definitely. Like, winning the tag titles with Harry, and having Brett and Natty there was just storybook.
Yeah.
In a way, like my very first ever match is myself and Harry against Teddy and Matt. So that was in 1995. So 15 years later, to win the tag team titles on, like on Raw, it was amazing, man. It was. You'd think that would only happen if you were writing a story.
Yep.
But we really did that. And then winning the tag titles 5 years later with Cesaro, to me, it was like an accomplishment that I know it's tag team division, and some people may not rate it as high, and that's fine. That's their opinion. But for me to like get back, like climb back that mountain 5 years later, to me meant a lot. And my whole NXT run at that time, like that, I'm really proud of. I'm really proud of a lot of my body of work, but that last year I'm very, very proud of. I really started to working with Dusty a lot, and I really started to really find myself, and the version of me that now had been on the main roster for 5-6 years, and not in a bad way, but like we change as people, and you're supposed to change. Like your experiences are what kind of shape you. So like, of course you never stop changing, I wouldn't think, because you keep experiencing things. So I found that version of myself with a lot of help with Dusty, and again the coaches were great then too. Even like Terry Taylor and I would maybe kind of butt heads a little bit at some points, but we both won each other over. And I have a lot of respect for Terry to this day. I remember when with my neck injury, I remember him FaceTiming me once just to check in, like And I mean, I just brought it up because it meant a lot to me. It means a lot to me. Um, yeah, the main roster, man. There's a lot of just a lot. The truth is, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'll bitch just like the next guy, but I tried my best to find the comedy or the funny side and everything. Like I would even entertain the boys and girls. I would do my own commentary backstage, watching the monitor. Which when I got hurt, I got a lot of texts telling me that they missed that, which meant a lot to me. That they appreciated my humor. I never knew if I was making friends or making enemies with that. But I knew it was entertaining to somebody. That I didn't know in which direction, but I just knew that, and it's just who I am. I just that's what I'm gonna do. I have a hard time. I have a really hard time watching a match in utter silence. I have an opinion. I've been doing this for too long. I have an opinion, whether you agree or disagree. That's fine, and I'm not going to insult you over it. We can debate it. That's what I love about wrestling. This is art. It's art and it's science. Mm-hmm. I veer a little bit more. There have been times when I was younger, I veered a lot more towards the science. I veer a lot more towards the art now, and for the longest time. So that's what I love about the debate is it's art. So you're not wrong, and I'm not wrong. Just who's going to be able to have more points in their column to show who's right or wrong. You know what I mean? Yeah, dude. I love it. I love my career. I can't. It's crazy. It's crazy to me. This year will be 10 years since I've had my last match in a few months, and like to me, that's crazy that it's been that long. In some ways it seemed like it's been forever. In some ways it feels like I was doing those 2 takeover matches like a year ago. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it feels like it's crazy. Like that's something I'm really proud of. Like that 4-way match with Neville, Sami Zayn, and Tyler Breeze. Incredible. 3 incredible guys. That was such a proud time for me because sometimes I'd have 4 matches in a night, and I was a little bit older than those guys. I just remember driving home from Orlando to Tampa after those tapings and being like, man, like you felt accomplished. Mm-hmm. I felt so accomplished when I would drive home. I'd be like, I did 3 promos, 4 matches, and nobody in these matches blew me up. Mm-hmm. They weren't outworking me. We were all like on that same level. So, and I love that, man. And we were all pushing each other in a good way, in a competitive way, but definitely not in a toxic way. Like as people and as wrestlers, we had this really cool synergy between the 4 of us that I kind of feel like it almost carries on forever. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen Neville in like 7 years, but if I were to see him right now, in my mind, I feel like I know I would pick up right where we left off. Mm-hmm. I think the world of him. I think he's so talented. I love my matches with him. I loved he's a really funny guy. Maybe not everyone knows that, but especially when he and Sammy start bickering, he's a really funny guy. And that's the side I got to see of a lot of people. I'm not perfect by any means, nowhere close, but I try to always see where someone else is coming from, or okay, this guy's maybe getting too involved in politics, mm-hmm. and I don't mean those guys I just mentioned. These guys are too involved in they're just too worried about the politics of it all. But I can appreciate this about them and this about them, rather than just be like, this guy's always politicking. I hate this guy. Like, yes, maybe on the surface you can think that, but you got to dig a little deeper sometimes, mm-hmm. because, like I said, this stuff is going to mess with your mind, and it's a roller coaster. We all go through ups and downs and twists and turns, and at the end, you hope that you get off the roller coaster in one piece the same way you got on it.
After your injury, did mm-hmm. you know what you wanted to do within the world of professional wrestling? Because many other people that I've interviewed, they've always brought up 2 names, and it's been you and it's been Natty, because you 2 have always helped in some way, shape, or form, help develop people, help them work on stuff. So everyone has always said so many positive things about yourself. So when did you know that you wanted to get back
Yeah,
into?
that literally, not to be like The Rock, but that literally gave me goosebumps because like I love. I'm gonna get emotional for a second. I I love wrestling. It's given me everything. Everything I got, wrestling. No, I had no clue what I was gonna do. You're shit. That first night when I got hurt, I'm not even in a hospital room. I'm in the basement of this hospital. It's cold, freezing cold. There's no I had like no service, like one bar in and out on my foot. Like I couldn't remember I think that same day maybe Heyman is on Austin's podcast. I'm trying to watch it, man. And like I can't. I'm just like sitting there with this neck brace on with no real answers. The surgeon comes in the morning to kind of give me the news, but I'm very in tune with my body, and in the moment, I knew my neck was broken. I knew I was never wrestling again. I knew that in that moment. Absolutely, in that moment, I did not know what was next. I had no clue. I didn't know anything. I just knew that this dream that I'd seen through was this version of it was over. I didn't know what was next. Prior to that, I did think I had a long term plan. I was 34. I remember they were talking to me about signing a new deal. In my mind, I was going to sign. This is just in my mind. My mind, I was going to sign like a 5-year deal that would take me till I was 40. At 40, I will have been wrestling at that point for 25 years. I'm 40. Everything seemed like a nice, perfect round number. And then I kind of wanted to get out. And that was my mind. I'm sure when I got there, that wouldn't have happened. Especially when you start adding like AJ Styles and these types of guys to the roster. Like I wasn't gonna, if I had been afforded the opportunity to stay as a talent, I promise I wouldn't have left. But in my mind at this time, 40 was gonna be perfect, and then I would start a wrestling school in Tampa. Hopefully everything's on good terms with WWE, and then not a feeder, but almost like because at the time I was getting the PC was pretty new.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting a lot of messages from people like, "How do I get to the PC? I moved to Florida, but I can't go to the PC." It's like, well, yeah, of course you can't go. I can't, man. Like I can't go to Vegas and just go hang out at the Raiders practice just because I'm in Vegas and I like football. Like, of course not, man. Like, come on, dude. I can't go watch the Warriors practice just because I'm a big Steph Curry fan. That's not how it works. So I remember thinking, oh, I'm going to open a school, and if it will be, I would never sever my bridge with WWE purposely. I was like, we'll have a good relationship, and I'm not a feeder system, but at least, hey, I can recommend someone to maybe have a look or whatever. So that was kind of my long-term plan at that moment. And when I got hurt, obviously the wrestling the next 5 years was out the window. And I probably got bitter with wrestling a little bit, or maybe either bitter or it just was really hard for me to watch
Mm-hmm.
because it had been taken away so abruptly. 1 minute I'm fine, and the next I'm not. And I get it, that's life. But we all have to. When something like that happens to us, we all have to go through it ourselves. It's easy to be on the outside. Well, of course, that's how it always happens to somebody. One day an athlete's fine, the next day they never play again. That goes for everybody. I get that, but this was just a bit of an extenuating circumstance, and to go through it yourself personally is it's a different challenge. So it took me about 2 years of like physically recovering and emotionally recovering and healing. And then, but here's the funny thing. I know he has the moniker of taking credit for inventing everything, Chris Jericho. However, in July 2009, So I've been on the main roster from February, March, April, May, June, 5 months. I knew Chris a little bit. I've been to his house prior when I was in FCW and stuff. I'm 5 months on the main roster. He's asked me to produce a match of his. So he invented TJ the producer. And then it was Jericho. I didn't produce it, but Jericho and Miz against Crime Time. He said, "Man, you've really figured Crime Time out. Can you please help us?" And I was like, how many years experience did Chris Jericho and Big Show have in 2009? How much TV / pay-per-view experience do they have? Where pay-per-view experience? TJ, Tyson Kidd in August 2009, 0. Bragging rights, the next pay-per-view is, bragging rights October. Bragging rights is my first pay-per-view I ever did, which is 2 months later. So I have 0 experience on pay-per-view. It just was very funny. And then Johnny, probably the next year or the year after, he'd always talk to me about being a producer down the road. And so then now kind of came the time where Vince said, "Let's try you out as a producer." He said, "If it doesn't work," he said, "there's many avenues here. If this doesn't work, we'll find something else." In my mind, I didn't think it was going to work. I thought it would work to a degree. What I thought, honestly, was that I was going to kind of be like, I don't know. I kind of thought eventually it might morph into me kind of being a producer, but kind of like almost like I shouldn't say checks and balances, but almost like a talent relations ish role where I just kind of make sure, just due to my injury, just make sure everybody's prepared and okay before a match. Really, like I thought I was gonna have some kind of a hybrid role of a producer tasked with like not really talent, not like talent relations. Those people do all types of stuff. They do a lot. In my mind, I would do like 3% of that with like some producer, some hybrid of that. And instead, I'm just like full bore as a producer, and I love it. I truly love it. There's days that are tough for sure, but that's life. There's been a lot, let's just say there's been a lot more fulfilling moments in my career as a producer than even as a talent. And I hold my body of work to a pretty decent standard. But some of these moments I've had as a producer have been life altering, probably. And maybe, I wouldn't even say more so for the talent, maybe more so for me. It's been different. It's been a lot. It's been so much more than I thought it would be, in a great way, in a phenomenal way.
Is there any particular matches you're most fond of, work and talent you're working with?
Yeah, there's I'm not really the producer on it, but like Natty and Becky, I helped them with a couple things. They had submission match SummerSlam in Toronto. I think the match is incredible. I didn't produce it. I only gave them a couple little ideas. They did an awesome job. Sasha and Bianca, WrestleMania, I'm very proud of. Bianca and Becky, the next year WrestleMania, I'm extremely proud of. Bailey and Io, I thought was like I have a lot, man. A lot of Carmella stuff. Like we worked really well. She was the first girl to. Kind of the first person, but the first woman to request me, and that was kind of how that began. What happened was I was doing, random matches. Like I would be paired with this guy, this. Then at one point, I got paired with Seth, and it was for. He has later said the same to me, but I told him, I said, "Man, thank you so much for our time." That I've been away for 2 years, and I kind of not turn it off. It's impossible for me to turn wrestling off, but I tried to get emotionally. I think I had to kind of detach as much as I could, which is not really much at all, but at least a little bit for me. And Seth really helped get me back on the saddle and back into where my mind was really engaged in this. And I mean, I thanked him numerous times, and he told me that I was just as good for him as he was for me. So we were a great match, but he was on Raw. And then when I'd go to SmackDown, I'd have kind of random stuff. And one time, I had the women, and then the next time Carmella requested me, and then Carmella requested me. Then there was a Carmella Becky match here in Tampa on SmackDown, and Becky, who I knew Becky since 2005. I met her in Canada, and Becky was like, "Wait, where are all these ideas coming from? Shit, you just have these in your head. Shit, I need to work with you more." And then I just started working exclusively with the women. Almost, the last time I had a men's match was, I believe it was in the pandemic at some point, like a match on 205 or something. I could be wrong. Actually, I take that back. I think I had a Sheamus versus Corbin match during the pandemic where Matt Riddle runs in. I do remember that. But yeah, there's also a tag match that I really love. It's during the pandemic. It's Sasha and Bailey versus Nia and Shayna. I think there's so many cool twists in that match, and it's the one where Bailey ends up turning on Sasha at the end of the match. But I was so proud of that one. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean, like I said, that Natty Becky match will make me emotional when I watch it. I just love this. Sometimes the submission match can be tricky because the false finishes become a little bit different, and they're not. I remember Brett talking about in his book about the match with Bob Backlund, and he's right. But there's also a beautiful art to it that if you do get them on those submissions, the people, the audience, I love that match. Like I said, I'll get emotional when I watch it. There's a bunch. I just, of course, like, that Ronda Charlotte Becky match for the Monumental, what it meant and how hard they worked to get there. I mean, it was unbelievable. Just what a moment that the women main event WrestleMania for the first time ever. It just happened to be on a 6-hour marathon show. The match starts after midnight.
That was the longest. That was a long show.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That one went on for a while. Might still be going on.
So what made you finally pull the trigger on opening the school?
So the school was during the pandemic, and I'd actually thought about the idea prior, just about like, I don't know if it's because like being at Brett's house when I was a kid, and he had his own WWF ring. I remember thinking like, man, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people think this, but I was like, I really want my own WWE ring too. And it still was kind of that thought process of the school that I had prior to getting injured. But now I knew if I were to, that kind of got put on pause a little bit, because how I would I've trained people prior to this, but how I would train people was like, I'd get in there with them and everything was very physical, but I can't do that anymore. Now it's all like, I can do a lot of things. Like I can do like a lot of something. Like I can do like, for a suplex, I can do like 90% of it. I just can't do the actual suplex part, or like I shouldn't do it. And so I don't, but like, so I have to, now it's a lot more verbal. I have to use a lot more verbal and a lot of explanation. So anyway, the pandemic kind of helped pull the trigger because we weren't doing live events and stuff, and everybody like, at first we were doing the shows at the PC, then we moved to Amway in Orlando, then we moved to Tropicana in St. Pete, and then we moved to USF in Tampa. So we were real central in Florida, in my area. So I remember asking Johnny about buying a ring. I wanted to buy a ring from the company, and I had this warehouse space that I was gonna store workhorse stuff in. And I said I could put a ring in there. I want to put a ring in there. Whether it's whether we use it once a month or however often we use it, however often we need it. And then Johnny said, okay, let me look into it. And then it was a process that was like most things. It just takes a little bit of time. So I tried to help speed up the process myself by got bold and text Vince one afternoon, and he said, "Yeah, you can have a ring." And then I text Johnny. He said, "Okay, can you screenshot me that?" I screenshot, sent it to him, and I had a ring at that warehouse 3 days later. And but during the pandemic, man, like we trained there a lot. Like we would do like 3-4 days a week sometimes. I remember some Sunday afternoons it was like man, it's almost not quite, but like there were times we might have had like 70% of like the women's division at that ring on like an August on a hot day in August in Tampa, man. Like it was intense in there, and they were working, like they were working their asses off. Everybody in there, and so then it just kind of developed and developed and developed, and then now more so kind of like Natty's the one who runs it, and I kind of give little tips, or I come up with like a couple little things to do, and then at the moment it's really invite only for the most part. It's almost like Fight Club. You have to know somebody to get into it, and you have to. There's two guys that I've trained that I knew prior that I trained from scratch, and otherwise everyone in there has like prior experience, and some guys are, they just been coming the whole time, and they just work their asses out. Like we have a good group of people, and so we train only at the moment just because of mine and Natty's schedule. We train on Wednesdays at the moment, and so Natty has to kind of limit how many people can be in there, because the more people we have, not everyone's going to be able to fully get in there. If you have 25 people in one ring and we're there for like 3 hours, it's just not. You're going to get in there, but you're not going to get like that super focused time. And that's like the last practice we had was pretty cool because I think it was a little bit smaller because some people were out of town and stuff. So it was really, really cool. And the deal that I made with Vince when I got the ring was I said to him, I said, any WWE talent, I said, they're welcome anytime. Like I'll train anytime. And I mean, they put me to the test with that one. I remember them calling me. We trained with Bray the week before WrestleMania, the one in Tampa with fans for the first time. He wrestles Randy. We trained at my ring. They called me on Friday and set it up, and we trained Easter Sunday. Myself, Jamie Noble, Bray, and then a couple of my guys. And then I remember Johnny called me the next day, Monday night, like I think like after Raw or during Raw was airing, and scheduled another workout the next morning so I remember texting my group of guys like, hey guys, like if nobody can make it, I understand. This is like 10 hours notice. I'm going to train tomorrow at like 9. And I always joke about it with one of the guys I train from scratch. One of the guys I train with, he's so funny. He texted me outside of the group chat and said, hey TJ, I know I'm he was brand new. Like his first practice was like the week before or something like that. And he is like, hey, I know I'm brand new and I don't really know much, but I can at least be a body. I can be there. And I said, bro, that will help so much. And he showed up. I remember he always tells us, and it's such a great thing that like, he's like so green. He's not even green yet. And he's in there with Bray, and he like, as he's kind of circling with Bray, he kind of whispers to him like, hey, just so you know, I don't really know a whole lot. Like, I don't really know much. And Bray was so funny. Bray said, don't worry, man. We're not about to reinvent the wheel. And like Bray led him through a practice, and like, it was awesome, man. Bray, it's so unfortunate, and he's very missed. I said this before to a friend. Bray's superpower was like just making, and not in a deceitful way, but he just made you feel like whoever he was talking to was his best friend. He always was just came across so genuine, and he was just such a real person that that was his superpower. And in that moment, he made my student feel amazing because he led him through this practice, and he wasn't like, oh, this kid, you know what I mean? He didn't. It was so awesome, man. And yeah, I I love the atmosphere we have at the ring, at the dungeon at the moment. It's been great, and you see like a guy like Dawkins or somebody like Liv or BFAB or Shotzi, and you just like you can't be more proud of them than just how hard they work and just that they want to improve. Like, and they're doing it. I know Natty posts reels and stuff, but like they're doing this behind the scenes. They're kind of doing this in the dark, so that way they can shine in the light. And that's wrestling, man. Like I said, wrestling's given me everything. I can only try to pay back as much as I can. Somehow, because of being kind of in with the family. So Ross and Bruce never charged me to train. And then training with Tokyo Joe, Tokyo Joe's, there was a payment to train with Joe, but it wasn't in the form of currency. It wasn't money. The currency with Joe was hard work and getting your ass kicked and then coming back the next day. But otherwise, for me, I've always been really fortunate like that. I never paid to train, so that's why I have our time. That's where our training is invite only, and it's just hard for me to charge somebody to come train. If I needed it as a business, yes, I could do it, but it just at the moment it's private, and I really like it that way at the moment. One day, if I'm not on the road and stuff, then maybe things change. But just like I said, the wrestling business has given me everything, man. All I can do is try to give back. So the people that come, all same thing. The currency, there's not money. The currency is just hard work and just an open mind. And I like another guy is Tahuti Ashanti. He's awesome, man. He's a good dude, and he comes and trains, and like he'll bump for like these guys that I've trained or like local Florida guys that aren't in WWE. That's what I love. It's this mix of like we have like genuine. Dawkins is a tag team champion right now as we speak. He wasn't in the dungeon this past week because he was in Spain, but he was there the week before. Bumping for guys. Like he's unbelievable. We have an unbelievable group of people. And so I think that's kind of where myself, but that's where I think Natty really likes keeping it private so that atmosphere doesn't change.
Mm-hmm. If you had any advice to give to anybody getting into professional wrestling, what would it be?
It's a great question. Come in with an open mind and just think like, as a fan, it's okay to think you know certain things, but the most important thing to know is that you actually don't know. Like a fan, like I'm a fan of basketball. I definitely don't know all the X's and O's that are going on the court or like how the play's drawn up. There's so many things I don't know. And I'm okay with not knowing. I'm okay with the fact that I don't know everything. I think that's part of what I love about watching basketball is that A, I can't do what those guys are doing. And then B, I don't know every single thing that's happening. And I'm along for the ride and I'm learning as I'm watching. And I think same as wrestling. If you're getting into wrestling, it's okay to like, it's so funny. One of the kids that I train, his dad is my barber. Well, growing up, Jeff Hardy was his favorite wrestler. So he hated me from the time Harry and I wrestled Jeff Hardy in Edmonton. He hated me. And he's so funny. He's like, man, we joke about it a lot. And then he just talks about like what I kind of live vicariously through these guys, but like now he's going back and watching old matches that he either loved or didn't like. And he's either not loving them as much, or the ones he didn't like, he's loving them more, and he's seeing the appreciation, and your view changes. And so I'm not disparaging anybody when I say, like, as a fan, you have to know that you don't know everything. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, you got to come in with an open mind. Otherwise, like, the day you stop learning in this business, it's over. I'm learning all the time, and I've been this summer will be 30 years I've been in the business, and so I'm still learning. So we're all still learning, you know what I mean? And I think just have an open mind. Just know that, like, those first few days are gonna hurt a lot, and it will get better. But this stuff hurts. Like, when I first got my ring, I hit the ropes. Remember, Natty put a video up, or I did, of me hitting the ropes. That's the first time I hit the ropes in like 5 years. And that night, my back was so cut up. It was like I was 14 again. Except at 14, I didn't have the height or the mass to really hit the ropes so hard. And the Stampede ropes were hard, tight as hell. But my back was so, like, my skin isn't calloused. I don't have that wrestling callus anymore. But my friend that still very close friends with to this day came and trained in the dungeon, and he's a big wrestling fan prior. He lived with they're from Saskatchewan. He lived with his brother. They lived up the hill from Stu's. It's a very funny story, but he comes to the dungeon for his first practice, and then he's at home. His brother comes home, and he's like, Corey. And my friend's in the bathtub, just sitting in the tub, soaking hot water, like just soaking in hot water. And he said, damn. He said, how was it? He's like, it's so tough. He said, this is so tough. And he's like, he's looking at his brother, who later on became my friend, later ended up fighting MMA. Funny enough, I was at a fight of his a few years ago where, like, I remember he kicked the guy and the guy blocked it, but he broke the guy's arm. And I kind of walked out to the cage with him at this show in Saskatchewan, and I sat down cage side. One of the coaches for the guy my friend fought was wearing a New Day shirt, which was very funny. This is like 2016, I think. Anyway, my friend, who later goes on to be an MMA fighter, he's sitting in his bathtub, and his brother's like thinking, like, you know, superplex. So what happened? He said, I took a snapmare. He said, dude, this stuff hurts. He said, I'm sore from head to toe. It's just tough. And just know that as tough as it is physically, it's equally or more tough mentally. It just is. It's just but if you're fortunate enough to get through it, you're just going to be so much stronger mentally and physically for it. And that's what my training with Joe, I owe so much to him. But I didn't realize that at the time, all the tough wrestling lessons he was giving me were actually not just for wrestling, but they were life lessons too. And it's kind of like how I hear Zack Ryder talk about the training with Bill, and that the training with Bill made him unfuckwithable. Mm-hmm. And that's how I feel about my Joe. That's how the training with Bill feels for him. And that's how the Joe training was for me. Same kind of thing. So getting in the business, just be open-minded and just know that, like, you're getting in now. The way the business is right now, currently, it's going to change a little bit. Mm-hmm. So it's constantly shifting. Whether slowly or rapidly, it's always changing and shifting, and you just gotta, to the best of your abilities, be able to adapt and go with it. And then after a while, you're in it long enough, you start to see it a little bit before it happens. And either you're totally right or you're kind of right, you know what I mean? But you start to be able to have that vision, be like, Like years ago, I remember I was like, when Jay wrestled Roman, and that was during the pandemic, when Jay had that first match with Roman, I'm actually not at that pay-per-view. PLE. I didn't have COVID. I was around somebody who tested positive, so I wasn't at that one. So I texted him that night. I said, hey, man, good luck. I said, just so you know, you will never be looked at the same ever again. Thankfully, it's one of those I've been wrong many times, and this was one of those times I was extremely right, and I'm very happy for and very proud of Jey Uso. And like that's just an example of like just having a little vision, being like, I'd wrestled them so many times. I know how good those two are. Jimmy happened to be hurt at the time, so then Jay, not that like, oh, he got the spot because he's hurt, but those are just the circumstances. And I just knew once the Usos really got a shot, they're never looking back. And it just happened to be Jay. But then, I mean, Jimmy followed suit too. There's no looking back for those guys. Mm-hmm. So it just getting into this business, just like I said, I know I've said it a million, just have an open mind and just know that like a lot of unexpected is going to happen, and you just have to like try to go along with the ride. And the more you resist and fight it, it's just going to be harder on you. Mm-hmm. That's something I've realized over time. I've tried fighting it, the system and stuff. And you can make little changes, but when you're just getting in, you just have to go with it. You can't really, you don't have the power of Spider-Man to stop the train at that stage. That maybe comes later, but especially in the beginning, you're just on the train, man.
Where can people reach out to you at?
I'm on Instagram at TJ Wilson711. 711 is my birthday, so I couldn't. Obviously, TJ Wilson would have just been cleaner, but that was already taken. And I'm at TJ Wilson on X or Twitter, which I scroll through. I post once in a while, not a whole ton on there. I mean, I don't post a whole lot on. I'll like reshare a story or something mm-hmm. sometimes. I'm just not so active on social media. I don't know. I don't want to post. I could, but I don't want to post a bunch of old wrestling stuff where it looks like I'm like living in the past. Mm-hmm. Like if I didn't have Instagram when I was wrestling. If I did, I would. Like if I were wrestling right now, I'd be posting all the time. Mm-hmm. I think it's a good tool to use, especially getting into the business. It's definitely a good tool to use. But those are two places you could reach me at.
I appreciate you coming on today. I appreciate everything that you've done for almost 20 years. I don't want to get emotional, but I love you for it. You've been my therapist. You've been my friend. I know that if I send you a text message that you're going to text back. And that's not the case for everybody anymore. Just thank you for everything for almost the last 20 years. I appreciate it truly from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah, hell yeah. Oh, it's my pleasure. Like I said, like I always say this about wrestling. You don't know who's going to make it, and you don't know who's going to make it in what aspect they're going to make it in. Like, for example, like Mick Foley. Mm-hmm. I can use myself, but let's use Mick Foley. He probably wasn't the best athlete at his, like when he was being trained to be a wrestler. I'm sure a lot of people wrote him off like, oh, this guy will never be anything. And he's been the exact opposite of that. This guy's an author. He's like a New York Times bestseller. He's a Hall of Fame performer on multiple levels, both his in-ring work and his promo, like unbelievable. But I'm sure a lot of people wrote him off at times in their minds, mm-hmm. wrote him off, or, myself included. I had a lot of people tell me like, now here's the thing. They weren't being, I can think of a few cases where they were being dicks, but generally it wasn't, I don't think it was out of malice. I think they're just trying to be realistic. I remember a lot of people tell me like the odds are against you, which like I already knew that. I already knew that before I ever took my first bump. Mm-hmm. But so thanks for reminding me, but I already knew that part. You don't know, like you don't know who's gonna make it in what capacity. Who, like the guy that you're a dick to or whatever might become the booker. You don't know that. You don't know where somebody's road takes them, man. Mm-hmm. Who, like these stories that have like ultimate success at the end of them, whenever you hear the person talk, it's almost always the same thing. Right before they turn that corner that led to that ultimate success, they almost were always about to quit. You hear that all the time. This guy is a fighter. I'm a huge MMA fan. This guy as a fighter nothing's working for him. He's about to quit. He gave it one more go, and now he's a household name. You know what I mean? Like it happens in wrestling, it happens in fighting, it happens in acting, it happens in sports, it happens everywhere. It happens in all aspects of life. So that's where, like you said, I always text you back, sometimes late, but I do my best. But I always, like I said, I try to see the good in most people, and that, hey man, maybe that person just needs a little positive motivation. Is that spark? And maybe they're about to quit, and this little positive motive, and I'm not saying it comes from me, but this little thing happens, and then they go on to do great things, and they're about to quit, but they got this one little spark. Like a lot of times, if I see messages in my inbox, I'll respond to, I'd say every single one of them when people message me about neck injuries, because I had a very severe one, but somehow I didn't have the most, for a brief time, I did have super severe symptoms where I was paralyzed, but that didn't last very long. It was about 5 or 10. Well, like imagine like Chris Bay, for example. I've been in contact with him this whole time, DMing him, and just I've told him this whole time, you're gonna make a full recovery, and I truly believe that. Someday, and I told, some of it's from experience, but I was never truly in the same situation he was in, and I was in a different version, but a similar one. And so I tell him, like, some days are going to be really hard, and these are going to sound like words, but just know, like, you can't give up. The second you give up, it's over. It's absolutely over in anything. If you give up podcasting right now, it's over. But if you keep going, you don't know what's on that other side. You don't know. So, and Chris Bay, man, he's been so I tell him all the time, like, I was at my ring, he sent me a video of him standing up by himself. I was like emotional. I was like, man, you just said you inspired the hell out of me, man. And I've been, like I said, I've been in this business for 30 years. I have seen a lot, and like I'm inspired all the time by people, and I've never even met Chris Bay. I've never even physically met this man yet. Mine and Natty's ultimate plan is to bring him to the dungeon. We really want to do that when the time's right. But man, but like, look at his progress. It's because he just keeps pushing. He doesn't give up. He same, like, in that situation, put myself in a similar situation to him. You can't give up. Like, the worst feeling, getting hurt was brutal, but and the paralysis was the scariest thing ever. But fast forward a few weeks, when I had the surgery, when I woke up from the surgery, was the worst. Outside of the paralysis, the waking up from the surgery was the worst I felt, because I had to cut through my head. So now my head was throbbing on top of my neck. It was awful. I just remember like waking up and being like, oh, I wish I didn't get this surgery. And then it was a process, and I couldn't give up. So I don't know. That's always my thing, is like, because once we give up on whatever it is, it's over. And again, that may not be a terrible thing sometimes. It's just sometimes it's a part of life, but it will be definite that it's over.
Well, thank you again. I appreciate it. And if there's ever
No,
anything that I can do, please feel free to reach out.
oh man, and I love when, like, we sometimes get in those late night deep talks about, like, developmental. I love developmental, man. Like I said, I love my time there. I enjoyed it. I didn't ever, well, again, whether it's naive or not, while I was there, I was never really too job scared. So, like, I remember that first like, okay, so this will be the last thing, but when I got to Deep South was March. I'm watching WrestleMania 23 at one of the guys' apartments. And I remember one of the guys said to me, he's like, hey man, heard that they're cutting people after Mania. You think that think we're in trouble. And I was like, they fire me and I just got here 4 weeks ago. I mean, then this was definitely not meant to be. I was like, honestly, I'm not even thinking in that direction. Like, no, I'm not worried whatsoever. I said, man, and this guy was also, he'd been signed the same time I got signed. He just was American, so he'd been there a few months longer. I said, dude, you're brand new. I said, I'm brand new. I said, I don't think they're getting rid of us right now, man. And I was right.
Well, thank you for your time today. I know you're very busy, and I appreciate it. I truly do.
No, you're good, man. Hell yeah. This was fun to do. We'll do it again, too.
Absolutely.